Hello and welcome to the introduction to the PentaxForums.com in-depth review of the Pentax K-01 mirrorless camera. Now what I have here is the K-01 alongside the K5 with a grip on it. You can sort of see that the K-01 is smaller, but it's still quite easy to hold. And the design in real life is much nicer than it looked on the product photos that we saw back at CP+. You know, the traffic light up here is still sort of childish, but the camera does handle very well. It's easy to hold. It's flat on three sides, so you could place it, you can hold it on the sides. It's really nice. And so I'm going to go ahead and move the K5. And what I have here is a selection of Pentax lenses. I have the K-mount 50mm f1.2 manual lens, which is back from the 70s. I have the A-Star 135 1.8, which is a manual focus auto aperture lens, so essentially you focus manually, the camera can still set all the settings for you. I have the FA 80-200, which is a more modern autofocus zoom lens. I have the DA 18-135 DC autofocus lens, which is really quite quiet. And I have the new DA 40mm XS lens, which is the kit lens for the K-01. And this lens is extremely thin and matches the design of the camera. It's based on the DA 40mm Limited. Actually, I believe it's got the same optics. The front element's the same. Aperture blades are the same. It's got 9 of them. But it comes with a very nice rubber lens cap so that nothing gets scratched. And when you're mounting lenses on the K-01, make sure that the camera's powered off. Otherwise, the shutter will be open, so the sensor will be exposed and you can get dust in there. So let's go ahead and turn the camera on, put the lens on there. Now we've tested the camera with all these lenses here and it handled quite well. Obviously it works much better with smaller lenses, so this telephoto zoom here, the 80-200, was sort of a stretch. But with all the other lenses, the camera feels great. It's easy to hold the screen up at eye level. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. The first sound you heard was the dust removal system. The second sound you heard was the shutter opening. Now the dust removal system is quite a lot louder than it was on the K5 and the K7. And the K7 actually introduced a new ultrasonic dust removal system, which is pretty much inaudible. I don't know why Pentax have gone back to the old system with the K-01. And it's sort of confusing because the SR is really quite quiet when shooting both photos and movies. So maybe it's just to make it more effective. But in any case, it is quite loud, so that's one thing we picked up on. Now the K-01 has a contrast detect AF system, and it's definitely adequate, and it is quite fast. It's much faster than the AF of the K5 in live view. But it's not perfect. If you test it out here very quickly. In bright daylight, the AF system isn't as fast as it would be on the K5. When it's darker, it's about the same. But when it gets really dark, the camera does hunt a lot, and it has trouble locking focus on things that it should otherwise not have trouble with. So that was sort of disappointing. But in the general case, it is quite good, and once we post the full review, we'll show you some detailed tests of focusing times and focusing accuracy, so stay tuned for that. Now, the most exciting thing about the camera that we found is the movie mode, which has really been improved over the K5. Now, the camera can record variety of different resolutions, including Full HD at 30, 25, and 24 FPS. It can record 720p, 60, 50, 30, 25, and 24. And it can record VGA at 30, 25, and 24 FPS. So I'm going to go ahead and set it to 720 at 60. And one great thing is you can control the shutter speed, aperture, and ISO before and during recording. So that's new with this camera. You can also set the ISO to auto, in which case you cannot change it during recording. But if you leave it at manual, when you start you could change it. And obviously you can use the rear E-dial to change the shutter speed also. By pressing the EV button, you switch over to the aperture. And one problem is that while recording, you can hear the E-dial clicking quite clearly. You can also hear the aperture moving. So definitely plan on getting an external microphone if you'll be shooting video. Now another thing that's new with this camera is autofocus during video recording. You just press the AF button there, it'll try to focus, it doesn't really confirm. And obviously you can probably hear it too on the recording. But it's there, and it's a first for Pentax, so it's very exciting. Obviously they'll probably keep on improving it in future models. So as a video camera, the K-01 is great. You can see there's hardly any latency there on the display. And unless you're shooting in dark conditions or at high ISO, the camera really is quite good. I mean, now you can sort of see it, but if I turn this lamp off, the monitor does get choppy. But apart from that, the latency is really low, and it's significantly better than it was on the K5 in live view. So that's excellent. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the 50mm lens, which is manual, and I'll show you how manual focus and manual lighting control works on the K-01. I've turned the camera off so we can see the shutters closed. Now with the lens, we'll be using the aperture ring. So first we set it to manual mode. It asks you for the focal length for shake reduction. Just dial in 50 there. And if it were a zoom lens, you could either choose one of the two ends, or you can modify as you're shooting, or choose something in the middle. Obviously that'll change how effective the SR is. Now in order to enable manual lenses, you have to go into the custom function menu, and you have to select using aperture ring, set that to 2, which is enable. And that basically tells the camera that even though it's not getting any aperture information from the lens, it'll still release the shutter for you. So now we use the aperture ring to set the aperture. I'll select F4. And what you need to do is you need to press the green button to get the camera to meter and choose the shutter speed. Now the problem here is that the green button is hard to reach. For instance, with this lens, which is quite heavy, I can't let go of the camera if I'm holding with one hand, and I can't really move my finger over there. Now my fingers aren't that long, but they are of average length, so I mean, most users would probably run into this problem. So I can't really reach that button without compromising my grip or using the second hand to hold it. Same thing goes for the index finger. It's definitely misplaced. It would be much better if the button were here where play is, and then play were up there. It wouldn't be as bad. But obviously it is a minor thing, but if you're planning on using this camera to shoot with manual lenses, it is something you should think about. Now another feature for manual shooters is the focus peaking feature, which is new to mirrorless cameras. And basically what it does is it highlights areas of the picture which are in focus. It gives them sort of a white outline. Now you can't really see it that well in this picture here, in this frame. But I've remapped the red button, which normally starts video recording, to enable and disable focus peaking, which is really handy for manual shooting. And you can see I've got it on here, and if something's out of focus, it's not. There are no white edges. As soon as it comes in focus, it'll sort of be highlighted, and you can really see right there the edges of the hard drive are shifting focus very clearly. So that was the manual focus. Now here you can see the focus peaking again with the AF auto zoom enabled. I'm not sure why you can't do this with a manual lens. It won't zoom the image for you. It could be that we haven't found it yet, but we've tried and we couldn't find the feature. So stay tuned to the in-depth review for more commentary on that. Now another thing that users have asked us is how clear the screen is in daylight when it's sunny outside, and the bottom line is that it's really not a replacement for an optical viewfinder. If it's bright, you can see the center of the image, and you can more or less get an idea of what you're shooting, but it is hard to see the corners, especially when you have the information readout on the display. Now, if you go and turn that off, which I recommend, to the no information display, you'll just see the image until you focus. It will show you your shooting settings. That's what I'd recommend when using this camera. So that's basically it, and stay tuned for an in-depth review, which should be up on Sunday, where we'll talk more about every aspect of the camera, give you some recommended settings, show you some autofocus tests, talk about the handling, talk about the image quality, which is really quite exceptional. Out of the box, this camera takes images which we think are even better than those of the K5. Obviously, it's the same sensor, so the raw quality will be the same. But when you set this camera to P, you choose Auto ISO with the kit lens, which is f2.8. You'll be able to get sharp images and great color out of this camera. So if you're looking to start out with a more advanced camera, upgrade your point and shoot, the K-01 is definitely something you should consider. And with this huge selection of lenses, Pentax has almost 30, I believe. Sigma has over 30 autofocus lenses currently available, and obviously there are thousands of manual lenses and legacy lenses to choose from on the used market, and they can all be used with this camera quite well. So stay tuned for that, and we hope to see you on the site soon.